discuss and discuss more and figure out what we're going to do with it is this whole sense of alternative facts. And we're not agreeing. And if we can't agree on what's an objective truth, what is reality, what are we doing? I heard you say, Robbie, that we're not heading in this direction, and luckily we aren't there yet. But this doesn't reflect my experience either. But I am thinking about the fact that there are people who are living in a dystopian situation right now in our country, and I'm going to bring up the migrant camps right now. And, that's going to lead to a bigger conversation, I'm sure. But it's absolutely dystopian. It's absolutely the sort of situation that Orwell would have been very upset with and wanting us to address. So, one of the things that we have to get back to is facts. I appreciate you going back to a study and reading it for yourself. And I think that, I'll call myself out too. There are bits of news that I just take on face value. And so maybe I need to also do a little more legwork, go back to your original study and do more study. So.
I would start at the micro level, and I would start with myself, right? And I would encourage each of you to start with yourself. And part of the guard against these kinds of problems is making sure that you are getting outside of your own bubble. So think seriously about your acquaintances with whom you could have a serious conversation about those topics we're not supposed to talk about, especially religion and politics, those kinds of things. Do you have somebody in your circle of friends where you can have that disagrees with you, with which you can have a serious conversation? And if you don't, then that might be a signal of a problem. And then another solution to that is the information that we have. We talk about exposure to the media. Where are we getting our media? What are our media sources? I tell my students all the time, look at multiple sources. Don't just, if you're a Fox News fan, don't just look at Fox News. Occasionally you need to migrate over to the other side and watch MSNBC, watch CNN. If you're an MSNBC fan, every once in a while you need to watch the news programming, not the editorial programming, but the news programming on Fox News to hear how other people talk about these same topics with a different vocabulary from a different angle. And listen to podcasts that come from multiple ideological perspectives. If you are only getting your news from one side, you are missing the opportunity for good conversations with other people who are also human beings that are coming at this from an alternative perspective, and this falls on all of us. And it's easy to demonize those who we never even bother to listen to.
I can be pretty quick on this one. My answer is both ideological and historical. In that when Crèvecoeur, back in the Revolutionary War era, came to the United States from France, and he wrote about what is it that defines Americans. One of the things that he wrote was that we were a nation of joiners. And I think that's something we've lost. I think that every single one of us needs to find groups to join, whether they're community groups, labor groups, ideological groups, whatever they are, because all the things that are happening in 1984 and all the bad things we're looking at today happen because we're individualized and we don't have any power, we don't have any strength when we're by ourselves. So if we find people to ally with, people to work together with, then we can keep an eye on the government, then we can protect our rights, and we can improve our communities.
Our legal protections for free speech in particular are thankfully ironclad, very, very, very strong. The Supreme Court is in fact the most pro-Supreme Court, the current iteration of the Supreme Court is the most pro-Supreme Court. It's gotten more pro-Supreme Court, pro-free speech. Obviously, it's pro-Supreme Court. Although no, they limited their power once in the 1700s. What I meant was that they're the most they've gotten more for free speech. So courts in earlier eras had said that like passing out anti-World War I leaflets could be forbidden, could be prevented because that was like shouting fire in a crowded theater. That's that common saying, you can't shout fire in a crowded theater, was cited as an example of why the government should have power to censor anti-war speech. This is how ridiculous that common saying is. Today's court gives the rights of like the Westboro Baptist Church to shout insane, horrible, obscene things at the funerals of service members. That speech is protected. Everything short of that also is protected. So our legal protections are so good for free speech, and it's such an important freedom. But Ray Bradbury, another dystopian author in a sort of an Orwellian tradition, had a saying that there's more than one way to burn a book. So if our culture turns against free speech or having conversations, and we want to privately or informally sanction or prevent or prohibit or destroy people who disagree with us, that can be very bad, even if the legal protections are strong. Even though the book and obviously the production ends on such a depressing and sad note, one aspect of the book that is a source of mild inspiration or hope, slightly less bleak than the ending, the I Love Big Brother ending, is the appendix. There's an appendix following Winston declaring that he loves Big Brother. He's been fully brainwashed. There's an appendix about Newspeak, about how the dictionary actually works and how they were planning to change the language, but it's written in the past tense. It's written as if this was a quirk of history. This is something we're teaching people, but it was overcome. It's in the past, unlike the rest of the book, which is written in Winston's present. So there's that. There's some kernel of hope in the book that I wanted to put into your heads before we adjourned here.
I'm always telling everyone to embrace your inner Fox Mulder and trust no one, especially your government. But I do agree with Peter in that you should absolutely start with yourself. I will fully admit I went through a period when I decided to stop pretending that I was super lefty liberal, and I was kind of the sudden sense of freedom that I had made me a little bit vitriolic to leftists, and it was not a period of time that I'm proud of in the way that I spoke to people. But I reined myself in because you can't behave that way in a civil society, and you're certainly not going to win people over by treating people like they're inhuman or monsters or the other. So just start with a very good look at the way that you talk to people about your differences and be open to hearing the other side.
Okay. Well, I hope we've had a civil discussion here. And I just want to acknowledge, I know we've still got some cast and crew here. I really enjoyed it. Thank you very much.